Hey everyone, how's it going? Today we're going to be taking a look at some Baldur's Gate 3 models and specifically how to go about fixing when your head and body mesh have a seam that can show up. This can happen whenever two meshes come together, so on pretty much every character that's going to be the head and the body, but that can also happen where the ears meet the head if they're separate, which I think they usually are. Or if you're working with something like a tiefling or dragonborn, where the tail meets the body. Sometimes with the tail, though, it's not too apparent, but you can still see a little bit of a seam there. But for pretty much every character, you're going to have to deal with the head and body seam where those two meshes come together. Now, sometimes the seam will show up pretty badly, like this one. Other times it might not look quite as bad, so at a glance you might not see it here, but if we zoom in there, there's definitely the seam going around the neck here. So the solution to all of this is actually going to be preserving the custom split normals from the game. Now, if you've worked with any characters from Baldur's Gate 3 in Blender before, you'll know that when you originally import them, they're going to be facing the wrong direction on the y-axis. And the trouble comes from trying to flip them around. So there's a few different methods of flipping them around, and I'm going to show you where in the process that actually breaks the shading, and then we'll get to how to flip the character without breaking the shading. So if you want to jump ahead right to the solution, feel free to head over to this timecode. Also, you can use the chapter markers in the video description. So let's talk about diagnosing this issue. So whenever we encounter a shading issue like this, there's a few things that we can try. One thing to check, of course, is going to be the face orientation. You'll see that the faces for everything are actually oriented the wrong way here. So I can go into everything, flip the faces, and now everything looks good. But that actually seems to have made it worse. Now, another really common one is the head and the body right now are actually separate meshes. And so sometimes Blender doesn't know how to properly blend the normals between two separate objects. But I have another model here where I have actually welded everything together. So you can see I can grab those vertices and everything is stuck together. And this seems to have fixed a bulk of the issue, but we're still getting a seam, especially if we are up close here. So that definitely seems to have helped, but this hasn't solved our problem completely. Now, another thing that we can look at is in the object data properties here, we can go to the geometry data. It looks like I've already cleared the custom split normals on this one. But that's another thing that you can try. So if I go to this, we can try clearing it for the body and clearing it for the head. Again, it seems to marginally help, but we're still getting a pretty bad seam there. And again, on the welded model, I've already cleared them and we're still getting the seam. And then if we switch back to solid view here, it doesn't look like there's any seam visible in solid view. Not looking good in our textured view. So maybe this is actually coming something from the materials. If I open up my materials here, this is Volno's texture toolbox. I have some of my own stuff going on in here, so it's a little bit of a mess, and this isn't a texturing tutorial, so I will not be covering any of that. But one thing that I like to do when encountering an issue like this is to go ahead and check all of the inputs for our shader. So this is using a principled BSDF. So we have base color, metallic, roughness, normal, and a subsurface scattering weight going into it. Again, just a side note for the people who are familiar with Volno's texture toolbox, you won't see the base color through subsurface here. You only have the BSDF shader coming out. All that I did here is I went into the shading group, which is pretty extensive. But anyways, by default, he just has the BSDF coming out to the group output here, but I just took every single input going into the BSDF and made that its own output. Anyways, if I go to the base color and just look at that for both the body and the head, we can see that the base color looks perfectly seamless, so that's all good. Let's check the metallic. We don't expect to see any metal here. So, yep, it's all black. And then we can check roughness. And the roughness is looking all good. And then we can check the normals. And it looks like here is our issue. There's something going on with the normals. And to note, we're looking at the normals in world space here. So you might be familiar with looking at normal maps like this, but you're seeing the normals in tangent space here. This isn't necessarily indicative of anything happening wrong, because you might see little seams and other stuff when looking at normals in tangent space like this. This has to do with UVs and tangent space and math and geometry and all of those fun, confusing things that we're not going to get into. Because, for example, we're seeing a seam here in tangent space, but once we look at the normals in world space, that seam goes away. So we've identified our problem here. We have something going wrong with the normals of our model. So what else can we do here? Well, I'm going to switch it back to the shader view for both the head and the body. And then I'm going to look at the original model that I've imported, and these are the exact same shaders on my flipped model and this original import model. Again, this original import has absolutely no edits made to it whatsoever. So we're going to zoom in here, and we'll notice that we are not getting any sort of seam, and we are using the same materials. So something has happened from when I imported the model to when I flipped it. Something within that process has broken the normals. So if I go to the normal view here for both the head and the body, we'll see that in world space on the original model, it's perfectly seamless, and we saw that in the overall shaded view as well. All right, so what is it about flipping these models that seems to break the normals? Let's try just scaling along the y-axis, -1, hit enter, and so far so good. We don't have any seam showing up. Again, if you're familiar with this process, you'll know that they'll come in with a rotation. So let's go ahead and apply just the rotation. Still perfectly seamless, but we have a scale transform. So let's go ahead and apply the scale. And as soon as we do that, our normals get messed up. So after applying the scale, this actually flips all of our normals. So the face orientation is wrong. So why don't we go ahead and try and go into edit mode, select everything, Alt-N to flip our normals back to the correct direction, and get out of face orientation view. Again, that seems to have made it worse, similar to like the earlier example. And why don't we go ahead and try clearing custom split normals? Well, it just seems to be back where we started before flipping everything. And we still have a pretty bad seam around the neck here. So scaling -1 along Y doesn't appear to work, because as soon as we apply the scale, all of the custom normals get messed up. What if we just try and rotate instead of scaling, if scaling messes things up? So I'm going to rotate about the global Z axis 180 degrees. Again, we're still looking perfectly seamless here. We're going to apply the rotation, and we're perfectly seamless. Now, if you're only working in Blender, something you might not realize is Carlac is actually flipped the wrong way. So if you notice, on our right, her left is her more scarred arm. And if you have a look at references from the game, It should actually be the other way around. Her right, our left, is the arm that should have more of the scarring. So while this might not matter for symmetrical models, this will matter for asymmetric characters like Karlach. And you won't be able to just flip the textures either because the UV maps are not symmetrical. That might work on something like the face, but that won't work with the body. So if we just need to flip around the x-axis, why don't we just try that? So let's scale x -1, and now she is in the right orientation. We don't have the seam yet. And let's go ahead and apply the scale, and we get our seam back. It appears that no matter how we go about rotating or scaling the mesh here, we're always going to get the seam once we apply the scaling. And again, for due diligence, we can clear custom split normals, and it helps, but we still get the visible seam. And to cover all of our bases here, just to mention, I won't go through all of the steps, but you could try going into edit mode, selecting everything, going to mesh, and then mirror along X or Y, depending on if you rotate it first or whatever. The same issues happen no matter what. So unfortunately, that won't work either. So how do we fix this? Now, to be clear, we're looking at the original model here, no edits. It's our goal to be able to flip this model along the y-axis and retain the game's custom split normals, because it is actually the combination of the normal textures from our texture maps and the custom split normals that result in the smooth shading here. And we know this because if I go into each model here or each mesh here and clear the custom split normals, that actually results in our seam. So basically, it's not just the textures, it's not just the custom split normals, it is actually the combination of both of those that gives us our desired shading. So the one method that I found to be able to flip our mesh but also retain the custom split normal data is to actually use a mirror modifier. So we're starting from square one here. We have the original import. It has the custom split normal data. If you've already cleared this, you're going to need to re-import the model and make sure that you do not clear the custom split normals yet. So let's go ahead and select the body and add a mirror modifier. Now we don't want to mirror on the x-axis, we actually want to mirror on the y-axis, but we see that y is doing nothing because, again, when you import the Baldur's Gate models, it comes in with a rotation. So we can just apply the rotation, and now the now the y-axis modifier is behaving correctly. It's just duplicating the mesh on top of itself because it's using the world origin to be the mirror plane. So let's actually add an empty, and let's move this empty precisely -1 on the y-axis, just so we know exactly how far out it is. Then we'll go back onto our mirror modifier and say to mirror about the empty. So now we have two separate meshes. Okay, so there's the body. Now let's try the head. I can just select the head here, select the body, do copy, and I want to copy the modifiers. And that will copy the mirror modifier, which is mirroring across the empty. So if I have a look here, it looks like I will also need to mirror my modesty cylinders, just so that YouTube doesn't have a panic attack. Okay, so now we have our mesh mirrored. There's no seam. So moment of truth is, what about when we go ahead and apply the mirror modifier? So we have both applied and we still have no seam. And if you go into either mesh, the custom split normal data is still retained in both. Now, obviously, we have a double mesh going on here. We'll get to the tail in a second. So what we can do here is we can go into edit mode on both objects. I'm going to go into right view, turn on X-ray mode, and then select the side that's facing the wrong direction. Go ahead and delete all of the vertices. And then I'm going to select our mirrored version. And now I can just move it 2 on the y-axis, and that will put it directly on the origin or right in its original spot. And that's why I put the empty -1 exactly. That way I knew I could move it back exactly 2. So I'll tab out of edit mode here, hide the tail for just a second. And if we zoom in here, we don't have a seam around the neck. It is perfectly seamless. And her textures are all in the right orientation. And what's cool about this is we didn't even have to join the meshes. They are still 2 completely separate meshes, and they are perfectly seamless. In fact, if I cleared the custom split normal data here, that again, it is the custom split normal data that is making sure that our shading is correct here. So we'll go ahead and undo that. So now let's see about the tail. So for certain meshes, you actually don't really need to mirror it about another empty. You could just mirror it in place. So I'll do a mirror modifier about the y-axis. And it's doing nothing because I haven't applied the rotation. So apply the rotation and then apply the mirror modifier, go into edit mode. I can just select all of those vertices. It actually wouldn't even matter if they were overlapping with each other like this. You can just select everything, delete it. You can do that with the bodies because when you mirror the head and the body in place, they'll be overlapping each other. And if we go into the tail here, we can see that our custom split normal data is still there. If we have a look at the join area, it is also perfectly seamless. So just as an example here, you can actually mirror the body in place. So I have a mirror modifier going here. You need to make sure that merge is unselected. So even though the 2 bodies are now overlapping one another, if I go ahead and apply this, if I go into edit mode, deselect everything, I can just select the side that's facing the wrong direction with L to select linked, and that will select that side. And now we can delete all of that, and we're left with the body facing the correct direction. But once again, you need to make sure that merge is unchecked, otherwise both meshes will be connected to one another. Now I just want to cover one more example. We need to now flip these metal bits that go onto Karlach's shoulders. If we use the mirror modifier along Y, go ahead and apply the rotation. We won't want to mirror in place here because if we hit apply and go into edit mode to try and delete the unmirrored version, it's kind of just a mess of everything going on, and you'd have to figure out, okay, now wait a second, was this in front or is this in back, and which one's the right version? So we're going to undo all of that. So for this, you're definitely going to want to mirror it about the empty, so that way once you apply, you know you want to save this one and just delete the other side. And now we got those flipped around and placed on her properly, and they also retain their custom split normal data. No seams here because this is just a completely separate mesh, but just a consideration for what things can be mirrored in place and what things you'll definitely want to mirror about another object. So that's about it. That's how we are able to flip our Baldur's Gate characters in Blender to face the correct direction while also preserving their custom split normals. If you found this video helpful, be sure to like and subscribe and do all that other fun stuff, and we'll see you in the next one.